Let's break down 5 players that are set to go absolutely nuclear here in week 4 of the fantasy season. These players are going to help you guys absolutely dominate your league mates. No matter what you do, you cannot bench these players. And in last week's video, we talked about Odunze of the Chicago Bears. And here we are once again talking about Odunze of the Chicago Bears, who's going to face the Las Vegas Raiders, giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Last week, 15.2 fantasy points for Odunze, 7 targets, just 3 catches, 62 receiving yards, and a touchdown. But really, as that game went along against the Cowboys, the Bears just didn't really need to throw the football. The game script wasn't competitive. So I think that's why we kind of saw the lack of a high ceiling game out of Odunze. Scored very early. We saw guys like DJ Moore, Luther Burden, even Cole Kmet to a degree get involvement. And ultimately, it just wasn't a high ceiling game for Odunze, but the floor is undoubtedly there. And he still has a touchdown in each game so far on the season and a ceiling of 31.8 fantasy points on the year. This is your wide receiver 2 in full PPR, tied as the wide receiver 4 in fantasy points per game. And overall, we look a little bit deeper. Still the number 1 wide receiver in total route participation, number 8 in total targets, and number 5 in deep targets thus far on the season. I don't really see, Odunze's floor going anywhere anytime soon. And you got to look at this matchup on the road here as another smash opportunity. I mean, he's coming off of a game facing the worst secondary in terms of fantasy points allowed. And now just a week later, he's getting another bottom 3 secondary. Great spot for Odunze. This is a week where he is once again set to absolutely pop off and has a very, very safe floor. This is a player that you absolutely can't bench here in week 4 of the season. Except I want to take a look at Davante Adams of the LA Rams, coming off of a good game in week 3, found the end zone, 56 receiving yards off of 3 catches, 14.6 fantasy points. And I do really like Adams going into week 4 here. I know we saw the big game in week 2 with 22.6 fantasy points. And last week felt like, if he didn't score the touchdown on that, broken play or whatever, like that, this wouldn't have really been a good game for Adams. But what we have to look at is that the volume and target share for Adams has been super encouraging through the first 3 games of the year. 8 or more targets in every game so far for Adams on the season. He's number 5 amongst all wide receivers in total targets, number 5 in total target share, and he is number 1 amongst all wide receivers in red zone targets on the season. So you gotta like that. This is a home game for the Rams. I'm not sneezing at this Colts defense. They rank a little bit higher than some of the other teams we're looking at in terms of where they land in terms of fantasy points allowed in today's video, but Adams has been a player who's just been super solid, and he's going to have a lot of really safe floors throughout the year, but he's also going to have these weeks where he has big spike weeks. And I do think that the Colts defense is going to have to be focused on Puka Nacua, who is also having a phenomenal season by all metrics. But this is just a defense that I still think is good. I'm not sneezing at them, but I think that Adams could, have a game where he gets a little bit loose, doesn't have as much defensive pressure on him throughout the course of the game. Home game once again, so we like that. Adams just has had insane overall usage and volume. I think this could be one of the weeks where he absolutely pops off. Moving to the running back position, let's take a look at J.K. Dobbins of the Denver Broncos. Another solid game in week 3, 15.3 fantasy points, a touchdown on the ground, 83 yards on the ground. He now has 14.8 or more fantasy points in every game this year and at least a touchdown in every game this year. And this is easily the best matchup he has had all season long, as he will face the Bengals, who are giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. J.K. Dobbins is undoubtedly a must-start running back here in week 4 of the season, and he's really having a great year. He's tied for number 3 amongst all running backs in total touchdowns. He's top 10 in rushing yards, but you look at some of the deeper metrics. He's number 2 in explosive rating, number 1 amongst all running backs in breakaway runs. He's still ranking top 12 in metrics like evaded tackles and true yards per carry. He's having a really, really solid year, and we're not really seeing, RJ Harvey break into the volume, right? RJ Harvey had 2 rushing attempts and 3 targets this past week, and he's yet to have a game with more than 8 total touches between the ground game and the receiving game. This is J.K. Dobbins' backfield. There's just no other way to look at it unless he gets injured, and until further notice, Dobbins is getting the volume. He's a top 10 running back thus far on the season, and he's a running back that has to be in your starting lineup, even if you have to flex him, because this week 4 matchup is way too good to ignore. And you may have guessed it, I'm headed straight to Underdog to take the over on J.K. Dobbins to score a touchdown this week. I also like his rushing yards line sitting at just 59.5 rushing yards. He has hit that every game so far this year, so you can really take either line here. But don't forget, all new users who sign up on Underdog using promo code THECATCH are getting a free NFL Pick'em to use towards Week 4 NFL action. Take that free Pick'em. Take Dobbins over on whatever you want. I think either line could hit here. And if both of those lines hit, you're going to automatically double your cash entry. And on top of that, Underdog has a new exclusive offer to anyone who signs up using promo code THECATCH. Once you play through $5 on Underdog, you're going to receive $50 in bonus cash to play with in week 4 of the season. And on top of that, you're also going to receive a 50% deposit match on Underdog. So make sure you guys sign up using promo code THECATCH. That link is down below. All right, next running back that I want to take a look at is Omarion Hampton of the LA Chargers. Finally coming off of that big game that we were all waiting for. If you guys are Omarion Hampton owners, 24.9 fantasy points, 19 rushing attempts, 70 yards on the ground, a touchdown. But I think what was most important here, maybe outside the touchdown, 7 targets, 6 catches, 59 receiving yards. Got that involvement in the passing game, which is so important right now because this Chargers offense, even with Greg Roman as offensive coordinator, they are throwing the football at a ridiculous rate to start the season, where I think traditionally we kind of expected this offense to be a run first, play defense type of team. But either way, Hampton looked really good in week 3. And unfortunately, we know Najee Harris headed to IR with that Achilles tear. So Hassan Haskins, whoever else is going to be the RB2 here, is just not going to cut into this volume. This is Hampton's backfield to absolutely run away with. And he played very well against a good Broncos defense. I know they haven't been great necessarily against running backs in terms of fantasy points allowed, but this is still a good Broncos defense. And nonetheless, he's getting a much better matchup, no matter how you want to look at it, in week 4 against the Giants, who are bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So if you own Hampton, you cannot bench this guy. I mean, I know, after weeks 1 and 2, there's some question marks like going up against the Broncos, like, what are we going to do here? Are we going to bet? No more. No more even whatever considering benching Hampton. This is why you drafted him. He's going to absolutely take off over the next couple weeks, and it's going to start here in week 4 in a smash matchup on the road against the Giants. All right, and we're going to end the video with a tight end. That is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. This is a player that I think has to absolutely be in your starting lineup. You may not know this. Jake Ferguson is the tight end 1 in fantasy points per game and overall in full PPR scoring right now. Coming off of a monster game in week 3, 21.2 fantasy points, 14 targets, 13 catches, 82 receiving yards. He's like the exact type of player you want in full PPR right now. He's ranking a little bit lower in half PPR, but still solid due to the volume. Nonetheless, he's had 16.8 or more fantasy points in 2 straight games. He is the tight end 1 in targets, the tight end 3 in target rate, the tight end 4 in total routes run. He's running the 3rd most deep targets amongst all tight ends, the number 1 tight end in total receptions, the number 2 tight end in receiving yards, the number 1 tight end, like I said, in fantasy points per game, and the number 2 tight end in expected fantasy points per game. And on top of that, the Cowboys are number 1 overall in team passing plays per game. And I don't think that type of game script's going to change in week 4 against a good Packers team that's going to force them to throw the football. On top of that, CeeDee Lamb's out. We know that he's dealing with that ankle injury, and Jake Ferguson is basically, the recipient of all those targets. It seems like Pickens, in theory is going to get things opened up here. But at the end of the day, Ferguson last week was really the guy who I think benefited the most from the Lamb injury, although Pickens scored, had a good game and everything. But the other thing that you want to look at here is like, yes, it's a good Packers defense, but the one position they have struggled against in terms of fantasy points allowed has been the tight end position. They are bottom 10 terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends. So you got to like this spot for Jake Ferguson. Sunday Night Football, home game for the Cowboys. They're going to need to throw the football because their defense is god-awful, and the Packers will, kind of somewhat at least shut down the run and force them to throw the football. It's a good game script. Everything is there for Jake Ferguson to continue this early season run as right now the most dominant tight end in fantasy football. There you guys have it. There are my 5 players who are set to go absolutely nuclear here in week 4 of the fantasy season. Whatever you do not bench those players. But if you guys do have any fantasy football questions, please drop them in the comments down below. I'll answer every single comment on this video as the week progresses. And while you guys are down there, it does me a huge favor if you guys hit that subscribe button on the way out, and when the playlists and videos pop up on the screen, make sure you guys go check out all of our other week 4 fantasy content. We'll have everything you guys could possibly need here on the channel to dominate this week and every week of the fantasy season. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.